So cracking the code of cold outreach then. There are 4 people in this room who came from cold outreach. 3 people relatively recently, and someone a short time ago. And they came from, interestingly, different outreach activities and channels. So it works. It works. And I guess, just thinking about cold outreach, if I think back to the early days of my career, it's only about 10 years ago. Denise, it might be about 15. But, we started out in the pharmaceutical industry, okay? And I guess our version of cold calling was walking into GP surgeries, pharmacies, hospitals. And yes, sometimes you would have booked appointments. But mainly you wouldn't. You'd be doing, what we might call cold calling, but in the pharma industry, they called it speccing. So, you turn up to a GP surgery, and it got into a ridiculous competition sometimes, because it's like, well, GP, will see reps, let's say on a Monday morning. There was one particular place in Bolton, Monday morning, 8:30. So, of course, Monday morning, reps had this mindset thing about, Mondays are not great to spec GPs. Absolutely, pile of pants. But it was great if you had a different mindset, because nobody else bothered getting out of bed on a Monday morning. So if you did, and you turned up, so you might turn up at 8:15, you get there, and there's a couple of reps there already. You think, damn it, I'll be there at 8 o'clock next week. So you turn up at 8 o'clock, and you got in to see somebody. But then the next time you went, 2 more people were there at 7:45. And I remember getting myself for like 7:30 on a Monday morning, but I did it because it got my week off to a really good start, because you saw about half a dozen doctors. But, I think we've been brought up in that world, haven't we, where a lot of what we had to do was just go in and ask if we could see people. And Denise had the best story. So, what was it all? Ancoats in Manchester.
This was Ancoats, not like Ancoats, isn't it? Ancoats is very trendy. It was not trendy then.
So Denise turns up at this surgery, and apparently at that time it wasn't the nicest little suburb, as you've just said, was it? And so she was kind of like walking in, thinking, not do I just hope that there's a car? The car will be there, but is it going to have wing mirrors and hubcaps? That set the scene, yeah. So she walks into this surgery, in a nice little suit with a bag, and sometimes you'd sit in these surgeries and people were really kind of like looking at you, because you've got your little briefcase there, and they're kind of like sat there thinking, is she going to take my appointment? Is she going in before me? So you got like the deadly eye a little bit. So Denise wanders in, waiting room full of patients, and she goes to the desk, talks to the receptionist, asks if she can see Dr. Levy, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah. And so this lovely receptionist said, yeah, absolutely, love, yeah. If you go through that door there, that's where you need to go. So Denise walks through the door, down the corridor that this lady pointed to, straight out to the car park. So there you go.
The doorway, click.
So we kind of got, I guess, lots of experience of it. Did get better, didn't it? But today, I guess, classically, let's say in the recruitment space, cold calling has been about picking up the phone, hasn't it? And yet, things have moved on, and we have so many different ways now of thinking about cold outreach. So let's just have a look, because before we dive into it, it's worth just pausing for thought here, because, yesterday, you know, some people were a little bit outside their comfort zone doing video. And when it comes to cold outreach, sometimes some people are also outside their comfort zone doing cold outreach. And it's really, really easy to overthink this, okay? And let that kind of like habit brain, you know, talk us out of doing whatever kind of cold outreach. And sometimes what puts us off is the fact that we may not like, in some instances, to be on the receiving end of cold outreach. And when cold outreach is not done particularly skillfully, we can get a little bit annoyed ourselves, and so we press delete, we don't answer calls, we don't respond to emails, we don't respond to messages. And so it's very easy for our response to cold outreach to influence what we then do. It's like, well, I don't like it, and you don't like it because it's not been skillfully done. Because if you have a problem that you need a solution for, and somebody reaches out to you in a skillful way, you're much more open to responding to that. So just kind of like, you know, hold sort of like some of those personal judgments that you may well have at times, because people do cold outreach unskillfully a lot of the time. Let's just have a look at what I'm going to share with you this morning, and be thinking about, as I go through the next sort of like half an hour or so, think about what do you currently do from a cold point of view, and what could you be doing differently, okay? So I'm going to talk about why we would suggest in the market that we are in today, more than ever, it really is critical for your business to be having a cold part to your marketing strategy. I'm going to kind of like just, you know, give a bit of framing to that opportunity, so it gives you a sense of what the size of the opportunity is and how it can work for you, because it can work for every single business in this room, okay? Now, we're going to share a 6-step framework that you can follow, because, you know, yes, classically, it will be picking up the phone, you know, it might be banging out a whole bunch of emails, and we can be cleverer about it so that it works much better for you. And if you were to implement what we're suggesting here, I can guarantee that A, it will work, and B, there aren't many people that are going to be willing to do the work to get this to work, and you can. So we're back to, are you willing to do the work here? And then we'll talk about some practical implementation things to consider. Before we do though, some of you, a lot of you will have seen this slide, and it might be new to other people. But I guess just, you know, the more we work with recruitment companies over the years, I think that the clearer and clearer and clearer we see some of the challenges and issues that you have, and I think we try to make, you know, what we recommend you do as simple as possible. And if we're talking about lead generation, there's 3 key things. You need a content machine, because you need to add value to get yourself to stand out and brand yourself and your company, okay? Because you need that content to do warm outreach to your people in your CRM system that you've got relationships with, people in your CRM system that, you know, those relationships have kind of like cooled off a little bit. And then, if you only rely on the people that you're connected to and you've got relationships with, and the people that in your CRM system that you've got relationships with, you are going to be fishing in a pretty small pond. And if you keep doing the same things, what did Einstein say? You keep getting the same results. Now, if you want to keep growing, and we know how challenging the market is right now, we need to kind of be building a bigger pond to fish in. So the cold people that are in your CRM system, because there are cold people in all your CRM systems, we need to look at how we re-engage those people, because they're more cold. They're not a reignite campaign. They are cold. And then we need to kind of like, you know, build a bigger, newer, cold audience. And we need content to do that because we need to build some relationships. So it's very, very simple, okay? What I want to concentrate on though for the next half an hour is this cold outreach element. But that's how it fits in to the overall picture. And of course, let's bring ourselves back to this funnel, the buyer's cycle. Because, if they're cold, people don't know you. It's kind of like the stranger danger. And that, there's a bit of mindset thing here as well, because, I don't know about you, but when I was little, we had we had the, I guess the Green Cross Code man, but we also had the person that said, don't talk to strangers. We were brought up not to talk to strangers. And, some of that kind of like, psyche can reappear as adults. It's, and I could make a bit of a northern joke, couldn't I? That, if you're from the north, you're quite happy talking to strangers, but if you're kind of like, on a tube in the south, woe betide if you try to engage a stranger. I jest, but the reality is that there are people out there are candidates out there that you now realise you could find through doing a different kind of Boolean search. And you will want to engage those individuals even if they're not right for a particular role that you're looking for, that they've come up in that search. But suddenly, and we're not talking 10 or 20, are we? Some of the examples that Gabby was talking about yesterday and sharing, we're talking about a lot of people, a lot of potential candidates, completely oblivious to you and your brand. And I imagine they're pretty oblivious to your competitors as well. So great opportunity to start building and nurturing a relationship there. Now, key thing to remember here, right? Let's just accept. One of the facts about cold outreach is it's a volume game. It's a numbers game, okay? Going back to, I guess, my early days in pharma, we would have like a daily call activity. And, it would be sort of, it varied over the years as things got more challenging. But, in the early days, it was 5 or 6 GPs face-to-face, equivalent number of hospital doctors in the afternoon, 2 of which had to be consultants. And then, throw in a few nurses and a couple of pharmacists. So it was a busy day. But to get those 6 GPs in a morning, some days I might be driving around 20 surgeries to do that. And other days I could see 6 in one place. And by the end of the morning, I might have been to 3 surgeries and seen a dozen. That's not very often, but, but it could happen on a good day. So, in a way, cold outreach, if we're emailing a whole bunch of people, we accept that they're cold, okay? And we're going to accept a few other things. So just bear in mind that it's a volume game. So let's have a look then at some facts. People don't know who you are, so we need to kind of work on that. Because they don't know us, we are going to get more no's and more rejections, okay? It's nothing personal. It's just, well, why should they bother replying? You're a stranger, you've come from nowhere. Why should they bother responding? Okay? But from a volume point of view, we need to be thinking, some of you will say, what, I don't need, hundreds of new clients. I don't need 30 new clients. If I get 10 new clients a year, then that will be great for the size of business that you want. But to get those 10 new clients, you may well need to be marketing from a cold perspective to hundreds of people, possibly thousands, okay? Because you're not going to get these new clients overnight. It's not like reigniting a relationship and picking up some of that, that low-hanging fruit at the bottom of the funnel that the Reignite campaign can do. This is going to take more time. Because it's going to take more time, we've got to be more persistent. And so what is going to happen for a lot of people, because let's face it, right? Stick your hand up if you agree with this statement. As business owners and the kind of people we are, we're pretty impatient for results. Yeah? We want results now, today. Forget what strategy it is, Sharon. I don't care if it's reignite, if it's like, you know, re-engage, if it's warm, if it's cold. I want a result today. And I want it on the back of that first email. The times people have said to me, email marketing doesn't work, we've tried it. And they're utterly convinced by it, yeah? And so, you know, and you'll have heard me sort of probably say this story, some of you before, when I ask a few questions and I dig a little bit deeper and we find out, well, how many emails have you been sending? Even cold, I hasten to add, 3 or 4. 3 or 4. And they've stopped because they've not got a response. Really? You know, so this is a complete stranger and you expect them to trust you sufficiently to come back to you with a job. Not just have a conversation, a job straight away. I don't know about you, but, you know, trust takes a little bit of time to build. Yeah? So, persistence is key. We need to accept this is going to take a little bit longer. Louise, you shared a super little story last night, and I'm curious if you'd share how many contact points you'd had. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, on Superfast.
Yes.
Actually, I had another one this morning come through. So.
Oh, there's another, even better.
So on Superfast, I've got a 12-month campaign. So every month or every 2 weeks, I've got some kind of content going out to all my connections on LinkedIn. And usually by about touch 7, 8, 9, I'll get a response asking me. Like a guy this morning has, he's absolutely an NPC for me. He's come through and said, ready to move now, can we have a chat? So, just work.
And I think it was a job that you were saying about last night, was it?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's thousands of people that goes out to.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you know, so it takes time and it works. Now, because it takes time and it requires some persistence, and because, you know, we are impatient and we want results, we need to kind of like manage our minds about this as well. Okay, because it's really easy to talk ourselves out of it when we know possibly we could get some quicker results with, you know, if we just went back to our database to some slightly warmer relationships. That's fine, do that, but that's not going to be building the pond that you're fishing in, okay? So we need to be doing both. So consistency is the game changer here. And the reality is that the majority of people, and I hate to sound like a stuck record, but I'm very happy to do it, the majority of people are not willing to do the work because it's hard, yeah, and they're not going to get the results fast enough. So this is a strategy that you can control. You have a system and a process. You work with the fact that it's a volume game, it's going to take longer, and you can control the volume though, okay, depending on the level of leads that you need. Input opportunities are increasing. Do you ever write a slide?
You can contact people.
Thank you. That's it. What did I mean by that?
I quite liked about maybe offering some sort of consultation, or, you know, maybe trying to ask them if they've got something that's broken in their process or challenges they're having. I don't think cold outreach, maybe that's a way of trying to book a call in a softer way.
Well, it's kind of, well, it is, and it's coming from sort of, you know, adding value in a different way and opening up a conversation. Yeah. I know we had one of the speakers at last year's event. You know, Miles was talking about, you know, different ways of adding value, and many of you do this already in terms of the expertise that you have. You know, you do quite a lot of consultancy, and it's about, you know, coming at it not from getting the sale, but coming at it from wanting to build a relationship, and that being a long-term relationship. And how do you open up a conversation to get a seat at the table to talk about, you know, not have they got a job, but what are their talent acquisition plans? And from that conversation and the input that you can give them, you know, the evaluation that, you know, you might offer to go and audit their recruitment process. You know, but that can be built into a campaign. And it builds over time. So cold outreach, it is a consistent way, along with all the other strategies that you've got, to keep putting people into the top of that pipeline so that we can nurture them over time. And it may well mean, for a lot of you, that you need to look at different ways of accessing data to keep putting into the top of that pipeline, and I'll share some different ways that you can do that. It is a predictable strategy, though. Yes, it's volume. Yes, it takes a bit more time, but you can, you know, once you're willing to invest the time to get the system going, you will see things like what Louise has talked about, those constant drip feeds in, and that can build over time as well. And you've got client and you've got candidate side to consider. So, thing is though, most people don't have that system. They don't have that system in place. And what often happens is people go through a tough patch, or they can see their pipeline starting to slow down, and so then they think, I need to do something. So they begin to do something. Maybe they might go and buy a list or something, or they'll start looking at you know, their connections on LinkedIn, and they'll start doing a bit of LinkedIn outreach. But here's the thing. How long is that going to take for that to produce a result? It's not going to happen overnight, and they need to plug that gap now, but they've left it too late. So the idea here is, you know, have a system in place. And, you know, some of you I know will kind of like sort of perhaps describe billings as like a little bit, not necessarily yo-yo peaks and troughs, but, you know, a little bit kind of like up and down, possibly a little bit deeper up and down at the moment. But with a system like this in place, that begins to help you, you know, even that out a little bit more. Denise, mention anything if, you know.
What are people doing? So, I mean, we've got lots there, and obviously you can set up these automated campaigns, but if I start adding on thousands of new potential customers, so the database becomes quite, you know, is it better to use Shopify or something like that? I don't know.
Well, I'll come on to some options. Yeah, I'll come on to some options. So, you know, be willing to do what other people aren't doing, and that will come back to some of what you're asking there, James, in a second. You know, smaller companies like us, though, can do cold outreach. This is not just for big, huge organisations, okay? And tech, just, you know, highlighting something James has just asked, tech gives us an opportunity with multiple kind of like different channels to make this a little bit easier for us as well. Yes, there's some manual work to do. We've all got to actually do some one-to-one here, but we can use technology to help us with the volume side of things. Louise has mentioned something already, Dripify. So how does this cold outreach process work? So there are, I guess, big picture-wise, there's 4 key things to consider. That is, we need to consider who are the businesses that we want to do cold outreach with, and who are the people in those businesses. So we're kind of like, we're back to avatar here, okay? once we're clear about those, we need to go and get a list of who are those people. And there's various ways that I'll share that you can consider to build a list these days. We need a message, okay? And you've got access to that messaging that you can bespoke. And I think the Dripify campaign that Louise, you were talking about, that was the edited call campaign. Am I right in thinking? That was the email one, wasn't it? Yeah. It was the email campaign that Louise bespoke there. So you need a message, and then you need that process and the consistency of implementing that process so that you keep going until you're heard. And that response eventually could be, you know, get lost, or it could be, I'm ready to move, I'm ready to have a conversation, or things are changing, our client market's starting to pick up, we're starting to plan some recruitment, we need to have a conversation. Okay, so it's either way, but we need to kind of like be persistent until we get that response. So here's the framework then that I think we've got available to us now with the different communication channels and the technology that we can use. So we have got the classic, we can pick up the phone, we can still do that, okay? We've got email. That phone and email probably are the most common ones that we've been using. Of course, with LinkedIn, we've got LinkedIn Messenger, outreach. You know, we can use LinkedIn InMail to do cold outreach as well. We can use, I've got the phone, what have I missed? SMS texting, of course we were talking about WhatsApp yesterday. And it's interesting to hear more and more people talking about how they will get a faster response by WhatsApp, even compared to LinkedIn Messenger. It seems to differ a little bit, but certainly, you know, I was sat there yesterday thinking, I do use WhatsApp, but actually something I took away from yesterday listening to, I think both Cheryl and other people, is actually I could make a lot more use of WhatsApp, you know, in outreach and everything as well. And I was chatting to, I can't remember who I was talking to, but we were chatting about, I do hear more people saying, oh, I don't really listen to my voicemail on my phone. Or I only check it once a week, okay? So it would be very easy to dismiss that. However, there are people that do listen to voicemail. And if you're making the effort to dial a number and the answer phone clicks in, doesn't take many seconds to leave a message. Craig?
Yeah, I was going to say with a voicemail as well, because usually to get through to the voicemail you've got to listen, you've got to delete other ones if you don't, you've got a backlog of them. And
that's what people talk about.
15-second voicemail, no one's listening to it. You see someone's left you a minute, 2-minute voicemail,
yeah,
a lot more curious.
Yeah.
I would say that as well, so the length of it as well.
As well. Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Through to the last 6 voicemails that are stuck on their list.
Yeah.
This is a 10-second message, no one's doing that.
No.
But you
Yeah.
can send a voice note on LinkedIn, can't you?
Well, that's the other thing. That's the other thing. Yes. And on WhatsApp. Exactly. So it's kind of like, you know, just being aware of, you know, where we can start, because we're probably, you know, from an AI point of view, we are going to experience, you know, probably more voice AI and voice search and things. And I know recently, you know, I've got a couple of coaching clients that will leave me updates on their progress, and it'll be a voice note in WhatsApp, which is great. Yeah. So, and of course, I can't forget this, video. You know, the whole purpose of, like, the whole idea originally of that video session yesterday was using video to do BD outreach. Many of us use video, you know, for content, but there is a real cracking opportunity to use video for our cold outreach as well. you know, going back to what I was saying yesterday, just re-emphasize, you know, if you get an email, it's kind of like it's one mode, it's one modality, it's written, it's text, okay, and the percentage of the population that favour that modality is pretty small. It's less than 20%. But if we think about 40% of the population are visually preferenced and 16% are audio preferenced, that's 56% of people that you can capture with that video. Okay? And they might not listen to it, but they'll read the text, which we can obviously now do on LinkedIn. So,
can I just ask the question?
Yeah.
So are the messages that you're leaving all independent of each other, or are you referencing the fact that you contacted them
Great.
already?
Absolutely, Karen. And I didn't even offer a pound coin or anything for that. So you might well be thinking then, so is this sequential? Now it could be. And something that I do is, and it probably gets more further down the line, is, so if I leave a voicemail today, now, I will leave a WhatsApp and I will tell them, I've left you a voicemail. Yeah. If I know they're not someone that's responded to me on WhatsApp, I might leave a voicemail and go into LinkedIn. If I know they've responded in LinkedIn to me, quite speedily, I'll actually do the message on LinkedIn and say, just left you a voicemail. You know, or just checking that you, if somebody's not replied to an email, then I'll drop them a message on LinkedIn to say, just wondered if you got my email. You mentioned X, Y, Z. And so I'm kind of like using multiple different channels. So sometimes it's sequential, but sometimes I'm using another channel to kind of like back up a different channel that I might have used. And do you know what I would say is there's no kind of like, you know, formula, no recipe here. It literally is knowing the kind of people, perhaps, you know, how have they responded previously, and just leveraging all those different channels. And it doesn't matter what order you do them in, you will find out who responds to what channel.
Are you connected with them at that point on LinkedIn? Are you just messaging as a connection request?
That would be if I'm connected to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally when I'm connected to them. Yeah. And of course there's Messenger on Facebook as well. And I know that you know, there are some perhaps, you know, LinkedIn outreach people who will use Messenger to kind of like get onto people's radar that they've been sent a LinkedIn connection request.
Oh, what, on Facebook?
Yeah.
Quite weird, isn't it? Because that's like business on personal.
Well, but that's kind of like, historically we might have thought, well, you know, LinkedIn's business and Facebook's personal, but I think not anymore, James. I think, you know, Facebook is very business orientated. So
The other thing, James, is you can turn your personal profile into a business profile.
Okay.
You can switch it over, and because there was some issue a while back about people promoting their services on their personal profile. So Facebook created this opportunity that you can turn it into a professional. So mine's like a professional profile, so I can advertise on mine if I wanted to. But I just thought occasionally I'll share one of your, you know, updates or posts, and it will go down my profile. I didn't want someone to get the Facebook slap to say you shouldn't be doing that, you know, or whatever. So you can do that as well. There's lots of opportunities out there.
So before you start doing cold, if it has been a while since you reviewed your avatar, you may or you may not know, I think perhaps newer people might be aware of, but sort of earlier this year we did update the avatar questionnaire. So, you know, I actually think it's a lot easier to do. You know, it's much less about the demographics and it's much more about the problems and the challenges that your audience have. So, you know, if you're going to start building cold, in which we recommend, you know, into your strategy next year, and you haven't reviewed that for a while, I would go into module 3, download the avatar worksheet and just review it, okay? Because the questions are much more thoughtful about what is going on for your client and candidate audience. So just wanted to kind of like mention that. So thinking about lists, you know, James, you were talking about what do you do with lists? How do you get lists? How do you use lists? So, you know, some of you may well have got, you know, hard drives sat around with data on. You know, you may have got, you know, in your CRM system, you know, lots of people that you know you've not been in contact with for a good few years. You might not know where they are, of course. You don't know how clean and what the quality of that data is. But there are things like validity.com that we've mentioned before that you can use to go and clean a list up, okay? And of course, you know, we've got LinkedIn. Now, they're easy wins, okay? But if we're serious about doing this on a bigger scale, and we want to do that because we want to build a bigger pond to go fishing in, I do like that little analogy, then we need to look at different ways to get hold of lists. And of course we can go a buy list. You know, there are plenty of data houses that will sell lists, you know, and depending on what their area of expertise is, they may have bigger, smaller lists, but there's plenty of choice of data houses to go and buy data from. Of course, there's LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You know, you've got your LinkedIn licenses as well, you know, doing Boolean searches like Gabby was saying, to perhaps pull off lists there. You can go, there's so many different scraping tools. You know, you can buy, Jed, I think you were talking to me about, was it Lush? Lucia, that's it, Lucia. You know, which is kind of, you know, some software that will kind of like, you know, go and scrape lots of data for you. But you can actually go and hire people to scrape data as well. You can go onto Google and just, you know, there's lots of different kind of like options there. But, you know, there are people on Fiverr that you could go and hire. There are, some of you have got, you know, VAs, outsourced VAs. You can get, you know, freelance outsourced VAs to you know, from different kind of like websites, not just Fiverr, to go and build you a list based on the criteria that you want. So it's no longer just about going and buying a list from a data house. We've got a lot more choice over what we do. Now, so we know who we want to send them to. We've got ourselves a list, then we need a message. So when you think about your resources library, you've got a number of different cold messaging sequences and email campaigns. So you've got the classic cold campaign in the email campaign product. In the retained product, you know, Denise has created a cold campaign as well as a campaign to reach out to existing kind of like clients. So that's cold there. And there's also the updated new Messenger, LinkedIn Messenger sequence as well. And there's no reason why that can't be used in text, SMS text, you know. There's bulk texting that we can use. So you have the resources here. You've got the templates. You know, you can have a go at editing those templates, come and jump on a call, share them with Denise and I beforehand so we can have a quick review of them to make sure that it's speaking into your avatar. And then, you know, press start. And of course, you know, let's be honest about it, those campaigns, I think the cold campaign, the general cold campaign, I think it's 4 or 5 emails. 5 emails. So, of course, you're thinking, well, Sharon, you said I need to be persistent. There's only 5 emails. What do I do next? So what happens next is you go back into the email campaign template product, and you see that, you know, client or candidate nurture sequence. That's got 10 more emails in it. Okay, so you edit those and you add those into the end of your call sequence so it keeps going. And then what you do, obviously, you plan in and you map out. And this is why the planning before you act is important. You map out, well, okay, there I've got 15 emails. At what point am I going to drop a LinkedIn message, drop them an SMS, pick up the phone, have a conversation? Yeah, so you can map out what that is going to look like for yourself. And I think, being really honest about it, what I find is that, you know, I kind of like have that, we've got like a follow-up process. And, you know, I know what the kind of like the intervals are, but it also becomes kind of like individual as well. Because if you've got someone who is responding, then you begin to engage a little bit more differently. So you might get more into like a text messaging conversation to then get them on the phone. But you can manage that because that's based on people engaging. Because we all build trust at varying degrees. And of course, our needs change as well. And that will kind of like reflect how they engage with you. And of course, let's not forget phones, you know, and I think, you know, something Cheryl kind of like, I guess, got out of that session like at the end of the day was, you know, if we're doing cold, it is a different conversation, and there's absolutely no harm if we've not done cold telephone outreach for a while to just kind of like, you know, go back to basics and have kind of like some structure to that conversation. Call it a script, call it whatever you want, but have a structure so you know what your direction of that conversation is. Yeah? Makes things easier. Then we need to keep going. So we've got the content, we've got the messages, we've got the emails, we know the different channels that we can use. So from an email point of view, to come back to James's question about, well, what do you do? If you go away and you get someone to build you a list of, you know, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 contacts, what do? Do you drop them into your CRM system? Some of your CRM systems may or may not like you doing that. You need to, I guess, you need to have a conversation with your own CRM provider because you know, it may well be different. But here would be a suggestion is from a cold outreach point of view, what we would recommend is that you buy a separate domain name. So you protect your main domain name, your main email domain name. Okay. So we would use superfastrecruitment.net to do our cold outreach. And, you know, there are many pieces of automated email software even that you can use. We use Mixmax and a big, I guess probably one of the biggest players in the market at the minute is Apollo.io. Some of the biggest brands in the world use that, and if it's good enough for them, good enough for me. And so, why? Well, so what happens, so let's say you go and buy some data, and we buy it in good faith, you know, or somebody's creating it for us in good faith. And what I would probably recommend is that you start off using a sample of that data and you test the quality of it. Because the last thing that you want is to use your main email address, send out some emails to people that don't know you, and start getting being blocked, you know, start getting people reporting you for spamming, and the quality of the data being really low, so that your email provider says, I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to slap you. Okay. So we don't want any of that. Okay. So if we use a separate email address, then we're not causing any damage to our main business asset, because your email's a business asset, isn't it? Okay, right. Make sense? Yeah.
So go and buy household.net.
I've got it.
Oh, great.
Well, brilliant. Yeah. We'll just use that. Yeah. You see, you didn't know it at the time, but you do now. Now, the other thing as well is that there is another way of doing it, and you know, it depends where you are with your business, your level of investment that you want to put into it. But you know, I know that Jed, you guys, and Megan, you use. Is it Flow?
Flow.
Yes, Flows. So Jed and Megan are working with an agency that are doing that cold emailing process for them. I know Neil, that's not with us. Many of you will know Neil.
Just to say he's still alive.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, sorry.
He's just not here.
Yeah, he's not here. Good, thank you for correcting me. Neil Scarborough, bless him. Earlier, well, a few months ago, Neil started a cold email campaign and a cold calling campaign as well. So, you know, so that's, how does that work for you guys?
Well, I obviously do all the warm-up. Obviously, we use different email addresses.
Yeah.
And it's as what you've just said, but they act as us. So
yes.
My ops director will say to the contact, Jed, our CEO, has asked me to reach out. Noticed your hire, and just to let you know, every 2 candidates we send, one is placed and often started.
Right.
We also have 100% rebate in the first 4 weeks. You know, you could use that. And
yes.
then you just follow on, and then eventually they'll come back and say, oh, sorry, I haven't seen your email.
Yeah.
Great to set up a meeting, or let's have a chat, or we're looking for this, or we've got these vacancies, or we've got a PSL, but we're looking to review it. Could be anything, 20 responses, couldn't it? Yeah. And then we'll
take that up.
We'll take that. There's a quick to reply section, and then myself or my ops director or the relevant account manager, if we introduce them into it, will then respond, set up a meeting, we'll do. Got you. The next steps. Yeah.
So at the minute, that is just concentrating on email. There's no other channels that they're using, or is there?
Just concentrating on email.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's where they pull their data from, isn't it? And then once the email starts coming through, then we can use, you know, you could call.
You can then use different,
You've actually gone past all the stages of needing to call, because you've basically got the meeting set up.
Right. Yeah.
So
you're
straight into a meeting.
You're straight into it. Yeah. Cool.
It saves the time, doesn't it?
Yes, no, absolutely. And so, you know, if you know, it's kind of like that money versus time conversation. Yeah.
Sharon, just one more note on protecting your domain.
Yes.
I use Mixmax and ActiveCampaign.
Yes.
For cold.
Yes.
And then
ActiveCampaign. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And something that something that we have done is we've used Mixmax to, you know, warm people up, you know, over a good sort of 6-9 months, and people that are engaging with us and you know, regular openers. What we will then do, and we have done this, is we've then transferred those into our CRM system, because our our email provider, if we can evidence that, you know, they've been receiving emails, which we can, then they are more comfortable with us adding a volume number of people. We don't do thousands, but we'll do 500 at a time, and they're quite happy to do that. Think companies like ActiveCampaign, MailChimp, you know, and other providers, they are very, very protective of the quality of their service. So they are not going to like you adding 10,000 contacts into MailChimp or ActiveCampaign. They do not like it, because they don't know how clean that list is, and if your list isn't very clean, it is going to affect their deliverability, that's their credibility, that's their product, that's their service, and they're not going to like it. Which is why we go for things like Apollo to warm people up.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this question. We use Sourcewell for our BD.
Yes.
I've got a feeling, I don't know, you might even have it, in Sourcewell have some kind of mechanism in place within there that if they get any kind of sense that we have annoyed someone with our emails, they sort of cut that person off so it doesn't affect our email. I'm sure this is ringing bells I'm talking about. We weren't asking them, but I've got a feeling they do. I don't know anymore, so that I don't know if in that our instance we would need to have a different. We weren't double checking it. I'm pretty sure they did something like that. They would, as part of their platform, it's all within the platform. Stop that happening.
Yes.
And I'm sure
Yeah.
had a conversation like that.
Yeah.
And that's
It'd be good to know, because I know I've spoken to more people recently who are using Sourcewell.
yeah.
Yeah. So last couple of slides then, and then we're going to have a break for coffee. Louise mentioned Dripify. What's Dripify, some of you might think? So we've talked about automating email, because this is volume. Dripify and Expanded.io, they are pieces of automation software that you can use in combination with LinkedIn. So it will automate your LinkedIn outreach, your connection, and then you can use it to nurture in the way that Louise has described. So that sort of like speeds up, I guess another source of list building for us. You do, thank you. You do have to have a Sales Navigator account. So you create a list in Sales Navigator, export that into either service, and then you can automate a sequence there. And the great thing about them is that it will automate a message, and in that sequence, you can ask it to go and view their profile. So before you send a connection request, you can say, go and view a profile, go and like a piece of content. So you get on their radar a little bit. And then you send them a connection request. And so you can kind of like build that out. The one thing to be mindful of that you do need to factor in is that, people do respond. If you've got like a 30% acceptance rate and people are responding, it's surprising. People will kind of add a short message into some of their response. Not everybody, of course, but you need to be mindful that if people are engaging in a conversation or they're responding in some way, you need to manage that and be on it, because that's then a manual nurturing thing. Okay.
Just a quick question: does Dripify stop sending a message if they respond?
Yes, it does. Yeah. So Google. Now I've popped this in just because when we meet and we have conversations and people come on to weekly calls, somebody might say, is anybody using this? Because there's new software and technology and products coming out all the time. And so, it's just kind of like, being aware. If you're thinking, is there something that can do this? Just go and Google it, because it's amazing what is available now in the tech stack. So we want to keep going in this sequence until we get a response. We talked about video yesterday. So you've got all these different video options, okay? Different price points, including Loom, free version of Loom. Be mindful that will have Loom branding on, and that depends if you're comfortable with that or not. We talked about messaging, WhatsApp. There's bulk text messaging that you can use these days. That was perfect timing, actually. I did ask them to come just before coffee at 11:15. So yeah. And remember calling. And you can, some of you have got, great telephone systems, auto dialing systems. And just because, a lot of people will say, well, I don't answer the phone, I prefer being contacted by message or LinkedIn or email or whatever. It's a channel. Let's leverage it, let's use it, because there will be some people who still do like talking on the phone. I like talking on the phone. I like talking, so I'm going to stop though. And and again, just look at there's different video texting kind of like services that are coming out all the time, and they will have different price points and things as well. And so we've got 6 different ways of doing this. You can create your own blended version of that. You will know in your market perhaps what you get more responses from, make more use of it. And I would say, don't limit yourself to a few. leverage them all. Leverage them all, because you never know. And you might well find that depending on where you are at in the conversation, that they respond to a certain channel more than others. And the closer you get to actually having, obviously, a conversation about working with somebody, you are going to want to move them to the phone, because that's got to be the goal at some point, is actually just getting a conversation, hasn't it? So key takeaways. This is a strategy that actually, it is predictable, takes a bit of work to get the system in place initially. It is about volume. It's going to require some commitment. It's going to take a bit longer. However, it is easier to do than we've ever done it before. You need to give this time. Do not quit after 3 or 6 months. Give it time, okay? Trust the process. And I know this is a phrase that Denise loves, you know, when you start talking and listening to the business owners, they're all going to have an opinion, right? It's fascinating how many marketeers there are out there who've got an opinion but don't do anything. But when you start talking about what you're doing, they've certainly got an opinion, okay? And some of it's not going to be particularly positive. Just avoid them. Don't listen to them. Just keep doing what you're doing, because it works. And, you know, they can make their own decisions, yeah? So, any questions? Because I know some of you are already doing some of this. Some of you have probably done and stopped, and some of you haven't. So, any questions before we have a break?
For anyone who hasn't done it yet or stopped doing it, do it. It takes 6 to 9 months to actually start seeing some results.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Yeah.
So you really have to kind of invest in time.
Yeah.
Is that counted?
Both. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So just going back to setting up on the different email automation. So
Yes.
we've got MailChimp at the minute just because it's connected to our CRM.
Yes.
So would you do the cold on Mixmax or Apollo?
Yes.
And then when it's warm up, then move it into MailChimp?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else? Well, as that's digesting, we're here all day. We've got time in the afternoon. So, you know, whatever comes up, please do feel free to ask. Let's have a break for coffee. And if we come back at 11:10,